A new term called new anti-Semitism is in use during the last decades. Let us try and define it from the point of view of time, the time limits, the location, the characteristics and reasons. First of all, it started indeed in September 2000 with the second Intifada. And let me remind the listeners that the high holidays, September and October, are the most difficult weeks of the Jewish year from the point of view of anti-Semitism. So there it started from September 2000. It was enhanced by Durban I, by the Durban Conference in South Africa, and then by the 9/11 events, which came exactly after the end of the first Durban Conference. And the term or the occurrences are with us until today, so it is about a decade, 1 decade old. From the point of view of location, it can also be termed as new because there was a shift in geographical location. Since September 2000, most of the violent cases, and also parallel, there is always not only violence, but there are verbal and visual expressions that, and they feed on one another, the violence and the expressions. And they were much more visible and in Western Europe, Central, but mostly Western Europe and North America than before. Former focuses of East European and the South American, etc., there was anti-Semitism during the last, and there is during the last decade there, but the main foci are in West European countries. France became very major, Belgium, England was, the UK was always and still is very high in numbers, but the Scandinavians in recent years, for instance. So it changed also a location. Another point is that the type of violence changed since September 2000. Before that, and even the beginning of the 2000s still, cemeteries or vandalizing cemeteries took about 60% of the events. Then synagogues, burning synagogues. I remember sitting in Strasbourg in a conference, in the preparations for the Durban conference. There are 18 synagogues in Strasbourg, and 12 of them were hit one way or another. So then synagogues. But during last years, most of this decade with the new anti-Semitism, it is hitting people, students, youth, in schools, on the streets, people who have signs that identify them as Jews, and this is the fashion. Now, one more characteristic is that is new, is that the initiative that was during the 90s mainly in the hands of the extreme right and beginnings of Muslim activity went over to extreme Muslims, whom we call Islamists, who use anti-Israeli and anti-Jewish feelings, who foster them in order to crystallize Muslim identity in Europe. Today you have in Europe, Central and Western, you have about 22 million Muslim immigrants, most of whom, I guess, would have loved just to be absorbed in their countries and live as anyone else. But the radicals, the Islamists, are pushing to crystallize a very cohesive identity, at the core of which is the attitude to Israel and to Jews. Therefore, all these elements are new, but again, the image of the new of the Jew that is depicted by the propaganda and by the visual and verbal expressions remained more or less the same, with one more new facet: the distinction that played quite a role before between anti-Semitism, which is against Jews, and anti-Zionism, which is against the state of Israel. This distinction was blurred because this blurring serves a Muslim propaganda which sees Israel and the Jewish communities in the world as one entity. Israel is a Jewish state, and the Jewish communities as supporting it. We also see that Israel is a Jewish state and the Jewish community supporting it. But this was reversed on in a negative manner. And the attempt of this propaganda that is supported by a lot of oil money, by material and series that come from Arab countries, are imported into Europe or created in Europe, are aimed at delegitimizing Israel and the Jewish people by depicting a picture of a state and the people that, if God forbid, and for saying that, and it's even difficult to say that, are not allowed to exist.